My name is Vorrak-Sel, Senior Diplomatic Attaché of the Threnian Collective, and I am going to tell you the most embarrassing, most terrifying, most absolutely unhinged story of my entire 300-year career. It begins, as all great disasters do, with a very simple decision. We invited the humans to join the Galactic Council. Yes, we did that. Voluntarily. With full awareness of what they were. And if you are currently making the face I think you are making, then congratulations, because that is the exact face the entire Senior Council made approximately 6 weeks after the invitation was accepted. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me explain how we arrived at this particular catastrophe. The Velkorian Empire, our oldest and most irritating enemy, had been expanding aggressively for 11 standard years. Their fleets were massive. Their commanders were ruthless. Their diplomats were, honestly, the worst people I have ever had to share a buffet with, and the Galactic Council, in all its accumulated wisdom, had tried everything: economic sanctions, military deterrence, strongly worded letters with very official-looking stamps on them. Nothing worked. Then Ambassador Feodos, a brilliant and apparently suicidal Threnian strategist, stood up in the council chamber and said, very calmly, "What if we asked the humans?" The room went quiet. You have to understand something about humans at this point in galactic history. They had only been a registered species for about 40 of their own years. They had one small fleet, one space station held together with what their own engineers called a prayer and structural adhesive, and a diplomatic team that had on 3 separate occasions accidentally started a cultural incident before the welcome tea was even served. They were, by every measurable standard, a minor species. And yet, every senior military analyst in the known galaxy had a file on them, a very thick file, with warning labels on the cover. Because somewhere in the last 4 decades of observation, a pattern had emerged that nobody could quite explain, and everybody was deeply uncomfortable discussing at formal dinners. Humans, when threatened, did not negotiate. They did not retreat. They did not calculate acceptable losses and adjust their positioning accordingly, the way every rational species did. They got creative. Not in the artistic sense, although they did that too, constantly, and with great enthusiasm. No, I mean creative in the way that a cornered creature with too much intelligence and not enough self-preservation instinct gets creative. They improvised. They adapted. They looked at a problem that should have killed them, and instead of dying politely, they invented 17 new ways to make the problem regret its life choices. The Velkorian Empire, naturally, had no idea about any of this. Because the Velkorians had never fought humans. They had only read the reports, and they had done what powerful empires always do with reports about minor species. They had filed them somewhere they would never look again. So when the council quietly reached out to the human government, a cheerful and chaotic body called the United Earth Assembly, and explained the situation in careful diplomatic terms, the response came back within 2 of their days. It said, and I am translating loosely here, absolutely, we are in. What do you need? Also, we have some ideas. The also we have some ideas part should have been our first warning. We assigned a liaison team to work with the humans. I was on that team. I was at the time optimistic. I had read the files, yes, but I was a diplomat. I believed in process. I believed in measured planning and careful strategy, and the kind of orderly military coordination that the Galactic Council had refined over 8 centuries. The lead human representative was a woman named Petra Vanek. She was small, by human standards. She had short grey hair and the kind of eyes that made you feel like she was already 3 conversations ahead of whatever you were currently saying. She shook my hand, which is a human greeting involving direct physical contact, and she smiled. And she said, Vorrak-Sel, right. Okay, good. I've got 17 pages of notes already, but let's start with the part where I think the Council's current plan has 4 critical gaps. I blinked. We have not shared our plan with you yet. She tilted her head. I know, that's how I know it has 4 critical gaps. The human seated to her left, a stocky man named Dario Klust, who was apparently their lead tactical officer, made a sound that I would later come to recognize as suppressed laughter. I should have gone home right then. Instead, I sat down, opened my briefing materials, and began what I genuinely believed would be a standard alliance coordination meeting. What followed was 4 hours of the most simultaneously impressive and alarming strategic planning I have ever witnessed. Petra Vanek did not suggest a plan so much as she performed one, drawing connections between intelligence reports, resource positions, and Velkorian behavioral patterns faster than my translation implant could keep up. Dario Klust kept interrupting with logistics specifics that should have taken weeks to calculate. And their third team member, a quiet young woman named Sable Oryn, who spoke very little but whose data tablets seemed to contain approximately everything, would occasionally slide documents across the table at precisely the moment they became relevant. It was extraordinary. It was also deeply unsettling, in the way that watching something extremely capable move through its natural environment is unsettling when you suddenly realize you are also in that environment. By the end of the meeting, we had a framework, a real one, something the Council had not managed to produce in 11 years of trying. Petra closed her notes, looked at me pleasantly, and said, "Great, now the Council is going to hate parts 2 and 3 of this plan, but I promise it will work. Mostly." "Mostly?" I said. "Well," she said, very reasonably, "there's one variable we can't fully control." "What variable?" I asked. She smiled. "Us." "Mostly," she had said. I spent the next 3 days thinking about that word, turning it over in my mind the way you turn over a strange object you found on the ground, not sure yet if it is a curiosity or a hazard. I should have spent those 3 days running. The Council approved the plan. Reluctantly, loudly, and with approximately 40 amendments that Petra Vanek listened to with great patience, and then quietly ignored in the implementation phase. I know this because I was there. I watched her nod through every single amendment meeting, and I watched her return to our shared operations room and continue executing the original plan without adjusting a single line of it. "Petra," I said, "on the second day of this, the Council specifically requested that the initial contact phase be extended by 2 weeks. She said, without looking up from her tablet. "They were very clear about it." "They were," she agreed. "You are not extending it." "I am not," she confirmed, with the cheerful tone of someone who has already decided and is simply waiting for the rest of the universe to catch up. Dario Klust, seated across the room with his boots up on a perfectly good diplomatic table, made that sound again, the suppressed laughter one. I was beginning to suspect it was his default state. "The Council will be upset," I said. Petra finally looked up. She gave me a look that was somehow both completely respectful and absolutely final. "Vorrak-Sel," she said. "The Velkorian resupply convoy we need to intercept leaves their staging point in 9 days. Not in 3 weeks. 9 days. So we either move now, or we explain to the Council why we missed our window because we were busy having more meetings about the meetings." I had no response to this. Partly because she was correct, mostly because Sable Oryn had just silently slid a tactical projection across the table, showing the convoy route, and it was so precisely what Petra had described that I momentarily forgot how to speak. The operation itself, the first real test of this strange and alarming alliance, happened fast. Too fast. By Threnian standards, we prefer things measured, incremental. Announced in advance with proper documentation, the humans operated like they had collectively decided that preparation and execution were the same step, and I watched 3 Threnian military officers age visibly over the course of 48 hours. But it worked. The Velkorian convoy, 12 heavy transport vessels carrying materials critical to their expansion campaign, was intercepted, disabled, and turned back without a single casualty on either side. Petra had built a communication strategy, so layered and specific, that the Velkorian convoy commander genuinely believed, for approximately 6 hours, that he had stumbled into a quarantine zone established by his own government. By the time the confusion was sorted, the convoy was already retreating, and the window for confrontation had closed completely. It was, I will admit, beautiful. The Galactic Council was furious about the timeline. Then they saw the results. Then they were very quiet for a while. Then they issued a formal commendation that carefully avoided acknowledging that the humans had ignored all 40 of their amendments. Petra received the commendation with a gracious smile and a thank you message that was 4 sentences long, professionally warm, and contained absolutely zero acknowledgement that she had also ignored all 40 of their amendments. I was beginning to understand her, I thought. I was wrong. I had barely scratched the surface. Because 2 weeks later, the Velkorian Empire did something that nobody, not the Council, not our analysts, not even Sable Oryn's omniscient data tablets, had predicted. They sent an envoy directly to the humans, not to the Council, not through official channels, directly to the United Earth Assembly, with a message that essentially said, in very diplomatic Velkorian language, "We know what you did, we know it was you, and we would like to discuss terms." The Council received notification of this meeting request and immediately called an emergency session. There was significant concern. The Velkorians reaching out directly to a junior species was unusual, potentially destabilizing. It could mean any number of things, and none of the options on the table were comfortable. I was dispatched to speak to Petra immediately. I found her in the operations room, already fully briefed, sitting across from a tall, rigid Velkorian diplomat named Ozric-Taan, who had the expression of someone who had come here expecting a negotiation and was currently recalibrating his expectations at high speed. Petra was offering him tea. "You already began the meeting," I said, from the doorway. "He arrived," Petra said pleasantly. "So yes." Ozric-Taan looked at me, with the expression of a being who has recently discovered that the ground beneath him is less solid than it appeared. "You are the Threnian liaison?" he asked. "I am," I said, stepping inside and trying to project the kind of calm authority that my people are known for. "I apologize for any irregularity in protocol. Perhaps we should pause until the full council delegation can be assembled." "No need," said Petra. "The council specifically requested," I began. "Vorrak-Sel," she said, very kindly, with the exact same energy she had used every single previous time she was about to do something the council had specifically requested she not do. "Ambassador Ozric-Taan came here to talk. So let's talk." Ozric-Taan, to his credit, recovered his composure quickly. He was a career diplomat. He had been in difficult rooms before. He set down the tea he had not asked for, looked at Petra with the focused attention of a being reassessing an entire strategic framework, and said, "The Empire wants to know what you want." Petra tilted her head. "In exchange for what?" "In exchange," he said carefully, "for the Empire's acknowledgement that continued pressure on Council territories may not be worth the cost." The room was very quiet. This was, to be precise, the thing the Galactic Council had been trying to achieve for 11 years. The thing that economic sanctions and military deterrence and all those very official-looking stamped letters had completely failed to produce. The Velkorian Empire, one of the largest military powers in the known galaxy, was sitting in a human operations room drinking tea it had not asked for and suggesting that maybe expansion was not worth the trouble. Because of one intercepted convoy. Because of 48 hours of human creativity and a communication strategy that had made 12 Velkorian captains feel silly. I sat down very slowly. Petra negotiated for 2 hours. She was precise, warm, occasionally funny in ways that confused Ozric-Taan, but somehow also relaxed him, and completely immovable on every point that actually mattered. Dario Klust said nothing the entire time, but he was in the room, and I noticed that Ozric-Taan kept glancing at him with the particular wariness of someone who cannot identify a threat, but is absolutely certain one is present. Sable Oryn did not even look up from her tablet. When it was done, when Ozric-Taan left with the framework of an agreement that would take 6 months to formalize, but had its bones settled in that room that afternoon, I sat across from Petra and I said, "How did you know he would come directly to you?" She looked at me with mild surprise, as if the answer was obvious. "Because we embarrassed them without humiliating them," she said. "We blocked them without fighting them. We left them a way out that didn't cost them face. If you do that to a proud empire, they don't come back angry. She paused. Usually. Usually, I said. There's always variables, she said. Like the human variable, I said. She smiled. The same smile from that very first meeting, the one that meant she was already 3 conversations ahead. Exactly like that. I filed my report to the council that evening. It was long, detailed, and carefully worded, because I needed them to understand what I had spent the last several weeks slowly, reluctantly, and completely understanding. Humans do not make easy allies. They ignore timelines and amendment meetings, and the kind of careful bureaucratic process that makes everyone feel safe and informed. They move fast, and they think sideways, and they will absolutely do the thing you specifically asked them not to do, if they have calculated that it is the correct thing to do. But here is what I wrote at the very end of that report, and what I will tell anyone in the known galaxy who asks me for my honest assessment. When something is threatening you, something large and patient and very certain of its own power, and you need it to stop, you do not want the species that will negotiate carefully and escalate proportionally and draft 17 memoranda about appropriate response frameworks. You want the species that will intercept a convoy, convince 12 military captains they stumbled into a quarantine zone, and then make the Empire's lead diplomat feel comfortable enough to drink tea in a human operations room and quietly suggest that maybe the whole expansion project was not such a great idea after all. You want humans. Just perhaps, prepare yourself for the mostly. Because with humans, there is always a mostly, and somehow, terrifyingly, wonderfully, it always works out.